All right, the fallout from the Marlins COVID-19 outbreak has continued. The baseball world today is fuming about Joe Kelly's latest suspension with the Dodgers, and one of the game's top prospects made his MLB debut last night. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Around the Bases, streaming on the 110 Sports Network at 110sportsmedia.com/live. I'm Chris Brown. We are following some breaking news as well this afternoon, so we'll get to that in just a minute. It is Thursday, July 30th. A lot of developments, of course, have occurred in Major League Baseball in the last 48 hours. We'll break it all down. A lot to get to, so let's just go ahead and dive right into what you can expect on today's show. We're going to start today's broadcast with our top four, which is a new segment that we're going to start every broadcast of ATB with here for you starting now. I realized over the last couple of days, last couple of broadcasts, we've been a little bit all over the place, a lot of different headlines and things I wanted to try to get to, and so it's a little cluttered, a little bit rushed. So we're going to start this today with our top four big storylines or headlines or developments that I want to talk about off the top of the show. We'll come back after that and we'll talk about some other news and notes, some interesting items. Then we'll talk today about some teams and players who are off to notable starts, really good starts or really bad starts, and whether or not I'm buying or selling the performance that we've seen thus far from those players and teams. Then we'll get into some odds and ends at the end of the broadcast, as we often do, just some interesting fun stats as we head off to the weekend, and what's on deck, a preview of some of the interesting series that I am watching this weekend. And we are going to start with, of course, our top four for today, and we're starting with the latest developments following the Marlins COVID-19 outbreak. As we talked about on Tuesday, we do have some breaking news on that front, so we'll get to that in just a minute. As I mentioned, as breaking news on our Tuesday broadcast, the Marlins season has been paused following a COVID-19 outbreak. On Wednesday, we learned that an additional player had tested positive for the Marlins, and then again this morning we learned of an additional positive test, as first reported by Ken Rosenthal of The Athletic, which brings the total to 19 individuals within the Marlins organization have now tested positive for COVID-19. That is 17 players and 2 coaches. Ken Rosenthal tweeting this morning that the team anticipated the most recent positive test from its contact tracing. He also added that one of the 2 coaches that had tested positive has since tested negative. But again, we are up to 17 players on the Marlins roster, on the 30-man roster of the Marlins to begin the season, who have tested positive for COVID-19 in recent days. That is, of course, more than half of the roster. The Athletic's Peter Baugh on Twitter this morning saying the country of Taiwan has actually had 12 positive COVID-19 cases since July 23rd. The Miami Marlins, just among their players, have had 17. Meanwhile, the Phillies, who had played in Miami over the weekend, have remained quarantined. Yesterday, for the second straight day, all tests of Phillies came back negative, which was good news, but we have just received word this morning, as breaking news just within the past couple of minutes here, the Phillies announcing that one member of the coaching staff and one home clubhouse staffer have tested positive for COVID-19. As a result, the Phillies have canceled their scheduled workouts at their home ballpark indefinitely. They did note in the statement that no players have registered positive tests. Though it's important to note here, the incubation period for COVID-19, according to the CDC, can be as long as 14 days, with 4 to 5 days being the most common. So this situation certainly still developing here. Still a lot of questions in the air. Still a lot of questions to be answered. Things that are going to develop over the next couple of days here. As for the scheduling fallout, of course, as I said, the Marlins season has been paused until at least Monday. The original scheduling does not have the Marlins playing again until Tuesday, but a game had been reported that a game could be added Monday if the Marlins can field a team. Now, the Phillies had their games through Friday postponed as they continue their testing. They have been expected, the reports from the last couple of days, the Phillies have been expected to return to action on Saturday with a doubleheader against the Blue Jays in Philadelphia on Saturday, and then a single game on Sunday. Now, that has been the current plan, which, it's interesting to note, that has been the current plan, which would involve the Phillies, after a 5-day layoff, playing a doubleheader on Saturday at Citizens Bank Park as the road team against the Toronto Blue Jays, who've been prohibited from playing in Canada due to the COVID-19 situation. So it's already a very chaotic situation right now in terms of the scheduling of the situation as it is. That has been the plan, and then that was before we had received word just a few minutes here before we began the broadcast today that 2 individuals within the Phillies organization, a coach and a home clubhouse staffer, have tested positive for COVID-19. The Yankees, meanwhile, are, as far as more scheduling fallout, the Yankees are playing the Orioles for 2 games this week. Starting yesterday, the Yankees had been slated to play the Phillies, who had played the Marlins over the weekend. The Orioles were set to face the Marlins, so instead they're facing each other right now. The Nationals, who were set to play in Miami this weekend, had that series postponed. Again, this is just all the fallout basically yesterday, again, before we were receiving the word that 2 individuals within the Phillies had tested positive. Now, it's important to note, information is brand new, just out. We don't have reporting that I've seen, indications, statement from the team, anything to indicate that we know exactly, the situation precisely. It's impossible to, of course, ignore the situation that the Phillies had just played the Marlins over the weekend, and to keep an eye on that and what that could mean if we have Phillies individuals testing positive. We also can't definitively draw the line between those 2 things at this point, based on the reporting that I've seen. And it's going to be, we're going to have to see how this develops in the next couple days. We could see Phillies players testing positive. We certainly hope not, of course, but that's going to be something that's going to be monitored closely. MLB noting in a statement that it put out on Tuesday that there have been no positive tests since last Friday among any of the other 29 clubs aside from the Marlins. And that appears to still technically be, of course, the case. But there are plenty of questions right now. It's an evolving situation by the minute. New information is coming out on this situation. ESPN's Jeff Passan in a story late last night detailing how Major League Baseball is changing some of its protocols in wake of the Marlins outbreak. The league is going to be encouraging players not to leave hotels in road cities except for games. The league is going to mandate the use of surgical masks instead of cloth masks during travel. It's going to require that every team travel with a compliance officer who ensures the players and staff properly follow the league's protocol. This was all from a memo that Passan reports was distributed to teams on Tuesday. Though, again, as we talked about on Tuesday's show, and Passan notes in his story from last night, that nowhere in the 113-page protocol for health and safety that was written to govern the 2020 season actually specifically addresses how the league would handle a COVID-19 outbreak, let alone something like what the Marlins are experiencing right now. It didn't offer any sort of guidance as to what amount of positive tests would shut down a team, or what scenario would lead to the pausing of a season. And, Passan writes, the lack of specificity on literally the entire season for its existence, the presence of the global pandemic has been a glaring omission, multiple general managers said leading up to the season. So, this was how this sort of information, obviously it's a day-by-day situation, and it's, impossible to have everything written in stone in some sort of a document before the season starts. But the fact that there was just no specific information for how this is being handled, how the calls are made for games continuing amidst a potential outbreak as the Marlins play the Phillies on Sunday, which certainly should not have been allowed to happen. a complete breakdown right now in so many ways. And then, of course, we have this news today that two members of the Phillies organization have tested positive for COVID-19. So, it's very tricky to know where things are right now. I'm a little bit at a loss for words. Don't have this, perfectly thought out. But tricky is not even the right word. This is I don't know. Nobody really seems to know where this is going next in terms of Major League Baseball. The league basically saying, this is unfortunate. We didn't want this. Obviously, this Marlins outbreak is not good, but essentially, the vibe has been, okay, we're going to tighten our protocols. This sort of thing could happen. We knew this could happen. And we're going to do our best, and we're going to reschedule, and we're going to let the Marlins pause their season, and then we're going to come back, and we're going to get back on the right track. But first of all, we still don't know the full scope of this outbreak within the Marlins. We're still adding additional players who are testing positive to the count. Then we have the Phillies situation where there could be, again, we could find out tomorrow that, certainly hope not, but we could find out tomorrow that Phillies players have tested positive. So we still don't know the full scope of the situation right now. Meanwhile, baseball is trying to adjust on the fly. And it's a complete mess right now. So, a couple of other COVID-19 related developments for you. The Athletic's Britt Grioli reporting Tuesday that the players' union is asking players to consider rules adjustments to maximize their health, according to a memo sent on Tuesday. The idea of double headers potentially being a 2 7-inning games or a 9-inning and a 7-inning game and double headers, and potentially expanding rosters to 30 players for the entire length of the season or for additional time. Rosters are people may have forgotten this, rosters, starting at 30 this year, but supposed to go down to, roster sizes are supposed to shrink back down in the coming weeks. So there's this talk that maybe the rosters stay at 30. Meanwhile, Washington Nationals, their outfielder Juan Soto, who just hours before the start of the MLB season was placed on the COVID-19 IL, he has been cleared by Major League Baseball to return to play after 2 negative tests. And normally that is it. Player comes back. But Soto is still awaiting approval from the Washington, D.C. Department of Health. The hope is that authorization could be obtained in time for Soto to return by August 1st. So, of course, this is good news that Soto has tested negative twice. He's gotten his negative tests. But it does illustrate the tricky circumstances of this situation, that Soto is waiting for outside clearance from the local government, because that's a situation that not all teams are going to be in with players returning after having tested positive. It's just another one of the ways that it's illustrated that baseball is not just isolated from, as all sports aren't, isolated from what's going on in the local communities where those teams are positioned, to the broader landscape of the state and the country that they're in right now. A couple other COVID-19 related updates for you. Atlanta Braves catchers Travis d'Arnaud and Tyler Flowers were activated from the IL by the team yesterday. Both had shown COVID-19 symptoms reportedly. We don't have confirmation they ever tested positive, but the pair had shown symptoms, had been placed on the IL, but they've apparently cleared all the testing processes required for them to return to play. Meanwhile, Cincinnati's Mike Moustakas and Nick Senzel have both been activated from the IL, and they were in the lineup for the team yesterday after waking up feeling ill over the weekend. They had never tested positive, it doesn't appear, but they had been on the IL. They are now back with the Reds. So as far as this situation right now, overall, it's still very much a mess. There are still plenty of voices calling for the season to be paused entirely or called off, and things are changing by the minute. We'll see how this changes, the fallout of this. Like I said, the trickiest part of this whole situation, actually I shouldn't say the trickiest part, but one tricky aspect of this whole situation is that we do not know the full scope of the situation still at this point. Because as I mentioned, the incubation period for testing positive and showing and potentially showing symptoms can be several days. So we still don't know the full impact of this yet. It's going to be something that we continue to monitor. I'm sure there'll be plenty of new developments on this over the weekend. There was a plan that Major League Baseball put out as far as scheduling yesterday. We don't know how much that's going to change. The Phillies, again, expected to play in a doubleheader, hosting the Blue Jays, who are the home team, at Citizens Bank Park on Saturday. But at this point, that seems like that may be unlikely as well. We'll have to see how that develops in the coming hours and days here. So we'll go ahead and move on to one of our other top 4 storylines, developments for today, and it's what a lot of the baseball world is talking about, aside from the Marlins outbreak situation. The Dodgers' Joe Kelly has been suspended for 8 games. Major League Baseball announced yesterday for his role in Tuesday's benches clearing incident between the Dodgers and the Astros. So if you had Joe Kelly as your first player to be disciplined for the fallout from the 2017 Astros sign-stealing scandal, congratulations, because that is exactly what happened. So basically what happened here, Los Angeles Dodgers manager Dave Roberts has received a 1-game suspension, which he served last night, and Houston manager Dusty Baker was fined. In a statement, Major League Baseball noted that Kelly has previously been suspended in his career for intentionally throwing at batters before saying that he, quote, threw a pitch in the area of the head of Alex Bregman and later taunted Carlos Correa, which led to the bench's clearing. Kelly is appealing his suspension, which is 8 games, is the equivalent of just shy of 22 games in a 162-game season. So that is the situation. That is the bare bones of the situation. And baseball and several of its players are very, very much, expressing strong opinions over the last couple days about that situation. It's been noted by several people that this punishment certainly seems harsh. Los Angeles Angels relief pitcher Keenan Middleton tweeting, "Free Joe Kelly." Mets starting pitcher Marcus Stroman tweeting that it makes 0 sense. He wasn't even thrown out of the game. MLB siding with protecting a team that openly and knowingly cheated their way to a World Series. He doesn't deserve to be suspended at all, hoping he wins his appeal. And Indians starting pitcher Mike Clevenger on Twitter tweeting at John Heyman of MLB Network saying, "And what do the Astros players deserve, John? Just snitch and walk free and still seem confused as to why everyone is mad." So many players throughout the game of baseball are upset with Joe Kelly receiving this 8-game suspension for throwing near the head of Alex Bregman and taunting Carlos Correa. And this is a complicated situation. This isn't just as simple as I think many people are making it out to be. There's a couple of things to consider. First of all, this anger on the part of the players and this, feeling that Joe Kelly doesn't deserve a suspension like this comes from the fact that the Astros individual players were never disciplined as a result of this sign-stealing scandal within the Astros organization. As part of the deal that was made with the commissioner's office in their investigation, no individual players were punished for the situation. Of course, the general manager and the manager of the Astros both ended up being fired, but no individual players received any suspensions or significant fines or anything like that. And several within the baseball community, several players on several teams are clearly not happy about that. They expressed that disapproval at the time. And then you have, as many people expect it to be the case, you have a situation where a team retaliates, tries to send a message to the Astros. And as Mark Carrick of The Athletic noted, MLB had to make an example out of someone, and that somebody is Joe Kelly. Which is true. It's certainly clear that with this 8-game suspension, Major League Baseball is trying to make a statement to avoid this getting out of hand and having teams throw at the Astros repeatedly, at near Astros hitters. And I understand the frustration that players in the game feel about how this was handled by the commissioner's office, the Astros sign stealing situation. You're allowed to be upset, or frustrated, or mad that Astros players individually did not receive any punishment for the situation. But here's the thing. Here's the thing that the biggest thing to me is that I don't understand. That people just don't seem to be considering at all. Throwing near somebody's head is just not an appropriate form of retaliation. It just ever. Period. It's just never okay. I don't believe Kelly in that pitch was just off and that he just lost control of the pitch. I mean, clearly, obviously, the commissioner's office Major League Baseball doesn't believe that's the case. I don't believe that excuse for a minute. People have said, well, look, he didn't even hit Bregman, which is true. But Joe Kelly can make all the funny faces he wants, but pitches, fastballs of 90, 95 plus miles an hour near somebody's head can get someone seriously injured or much worse. I mean, it's just never acceptable. I really don't care what the circumstances are. That's not how you settle that. Two wrongs don't make a right. It doesn't solve the situation. It doesn't make anything better. It just makes things worse. It's as simple as that to me. I understand that players are upset with how the Astros situation was handled. But the solution to that is not throwing a 95 mile an hour fastball close to somebody's head. It's just not. It never is. That's just not okay at all. I really don't care what the circumstances are. An interesting development somewhat related to this situation last night, Evan Drellich of The Athletic reporting late last night that Major League Baseball and the Major League Baseball Players Association have agreed that players who steal signs electronically can be suspended and receive no pay or service time. Drellich is reporting that the league has hired an independent security firm to monitor video room entrances. Commissioner Rob Manfred will have the power to implement these suspensions. The players' union, will have the ability to appeal. There's no set length or severity for the punishments. Precedents are expected to develop over time. As an added wrinkle, Drellich reporting that if 3+ players on the same team violate the rules at the same time, the league and union are expected to develop a plan to stagger the punishments so a roster isn't too depleted, which that's a little odd development that we're just going to say, well, if 3 players are stealing signs, we don't want to hurt the team too much, so we'll stagger their punishments. That's just very strange to me. That doesn't make much sense. But that part aside, there's an agreement now in place that players individually who are proven to have stolen signs electronically can be suspended and receive no pay or service time during that suspension, and Rob Manfred has the authority, the commissioner's office has the authority to do that. Which, that certainly makes sense. I mean, there's nothing inherently wrong with that development. Of course, it's not going to retroactively apply to any Astros, because again, as part of that investigation by Major League Baseball, no individual Astros were being punished. So moving forward, if a player is proven to have stolen signs electronically, there will be individual punishment, but that is not the case, of course, for the Astros situation. Players very upset about how that played out, jumping to the defense of Joe Kelly, but again, I don't even think we have to really even get into the situation of whether or not what baseball did regarding the Astros was right or wrong. It clearly was not. Players clearly not happy about how that played out, and I understand that. I'm not saying that I think that investigation went well or the outcome of that was perfect either. But the idea that the solution to that, the idea that it's okay then because of that to retaliate in that way, I just don't understand. I'm not going to say I don't understand it. It's just not acceptable. It's really as simple as that. We'll go ahead and move on to our third item here on our top 4 today to start the show on ATB Live. There's been a rash of pitching injuries to start the season. I look back to my show notes from the first broadcast here of Around the Bases exactly 1 month ago today on June 30th. I had it in my notes as one of the impacts of the shortened season and the circumstances surrounding this 2020 season. Players will get injured more frequently, especially pitchers. To be clear, I was not the only one predicting that. It is certainly something we've seen so far this season. Yahoo Sports' Mark Townsend added things up a couple days ago and wrote that as of Tuesday night, which was, of course, shy of 1 week into the season by a couple days, 32 pitchers across 17 rosters have been placed on the injured list with arm or muscle-related injuries listed as the cause. Among the pitchers who've been sidelined with injuries includes Dodgers starter Clayton Kershaw with a back injury, Houston starter Justin Verlander with a forearm strain, and Texas's Corey Kluber with a strained muscle in his shoulder. One team hit hard by the situation is the Astros, with Verlander out, Brad Peacock out due to shoulder soreness, Austin Pruitt with elbow inflammation. Others are day-to-day with elbow soreness, including Ryan Presley. They've had a number of pitchers dealing with arm and shoulder injuries. The Dodgers are without Clayton Kershaw, and now Alex Wood due to shoulder inflammation. The Cardinals lost Miles Mikolas to a right flexor tendon situation. He's having surgery on his right flexor tendon. The Mets placed Marcus Stroman and Robert Gsellman on the IL right before opening day. Toronto closer Ken Giles is on the injured list with a forearm strain. All this, and we're not even 1 week into the season. Those are just some of the names who've been placed on the IL with arm or core muscle related injuries. So is the short ramp up to the season and the circumstances surrounding this season a big contributor to this? One manager certainly thinks so. Dusty Baker, the Astros manager, telling MLB.com, he thinks the quick start, the quick lead up to the season here after the layoff is taking its toll on pitchers. Baker's saying it's all around baseball, it's everywhere. I'm hoping we learned a lesson by this. It couldn't be helped because of the coronavirus, but I'm just hoping we don't see any more injuries around the league, especially on our team. So after the offseason, this is how things played out over the past several months. After the offseason, pitchers have about 3 weeks worth of spring training. This is how the things played out. They had about 3 weeks worth of spring training, and then about three or more months, a little more than 3 months of just waiting, and then another 3-week summer camp leading up to opening day. So there's the idea that while many pitchers have been working on the side during the layoff, several of them probably were not able to consistently build up arm strength the way that they're used to in a regular spring training and a regular baseball season. And were often limited in their simulation games and in their scrimmages as they prepared for the season. So it wasn't necessarily as much that pitchers couldn't bring up their pitch counts. There were several pitchers who started with low pitch counts to begin the year, their first start or two, but there's several who've gone out and pitched, 6, 7 or more innings to begin the season. So I don't think it's as much that as the consistency of building up arm strength over time, rather than at the rapid pace that it had to kind of happen, I think, for a lot of pitchers. This is going to test the depth of a lot of different teams. And we're seeing great starting pitchers go down with injuries. We're less than a week into the season. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I mean, hopefully we see the rate of pitcher injuries decrease in the coming weeks. But I think it's fair to say that a lot of what's happening is being contributed to by the nature of this season. Of course, you can't directly connect the quick ramp up to the season and the unique nature of this season to any individual injuries. You can't say, Justin Verlander's out now dealing with this injury because of his ramp up. I mean, this is a older starter who had dealt with injuries this past offseason and in the spring. So you can't directly tie this, but I think there is an overall trend here that the nature of this season and the short ramp up time the pitchers had to try to build up arm strength is a significant factor in why we've seen so many pitching injuries to begin the season. So it's going to be something to monitor moving forward. Final item here in our top four today. Blue Jays top prospect Nate Pearson made his highly anticipated MLB debut last night, and he did not disappoint. He's baseball's number 8 prospect according to MLB Pipeline, and he tossed 5 shutout innings against the Nationals, allowing 2 hits and surrendering 2 walks while going toe-to-toe against Max Scherzer. Pearson became just the 3rd pitcher in Blue Jays history to throw at least 5 scoreless innings in his MLB debut, joining Mario Gozzo in 1989 and Trent Thornton last year. In some ways, Pearson did look like a rookie facing his first MLB opponent. He missed up in the zone with several fastballs, which is a common sign of overthrowing. And he walked Adam Eaton, the second batter of the game, on 4 pitches. So at times he did look like a rookie, but his arsenal looks absolutely tremendous. He showed elite control at times in this start. He had a fastball consistently in the upper 90s, painting the corners, an 85-mile-an-hour slider I saw that had Trey Turner completely off balance, a nasty slider, a great changeup. He was painting the corners and making Nationals hitters look silly. It was a really impressive debut for Nate Pearson. Again, baseball's number 8 prospect according to MLB Pipeline. Really impressive debut. The 23-year-old spent last year at 3 minor league levels, pitching to a cumulative 2.30 ERA with 119 strikeouts in 101 2/3 innings. I'm really excited to see what Pearson brings to the table this year. I think he could be certainly an AL Rookie of the Year contender. I have Luis Robert as my pick for AL Rookie of the Year, and we'll talk about him in just a little bit here. He's been really impressive, but Nate Pearson, a pitcher who I think could make an impact in a big way in 2020. The Blue Jays certainly have some work to do, but they are a team that, as I've mentioned before on the show, they're 3-3 to start the year. They're a team that if things fall right, I could see competing this season. And Nate Pearson, a big name to watch moving forward. All right, so we are about 30 minutes past the hour here, 1:32 Eastern on this Thursday. We're going to go ahead and take our first break. When we come back, we'll go through a couple of other news and notes, a couple other items of attention for you next on Around the Bases. Then we'll get into a little bit of buy or sell, some teams and some players who are off to notable starts, either some really hot starts or some really cold starts to the season. We'll talk about how much they mean and whether or not I'm buying their performances so far being what we're going to expect for them moving forward. That's coming up next here on ATB Live from 110 Sports. All right, welcome back to ATB Live from 110 Sports, streaming on the 110 Sports Network at 110sportsmedia.com/live. I'm Chris Brown, and we are back to talk about some other news and notes. But as we get underway, we are following some breaking news right now. Just in, Blue Jays manager Charlie Montoyo is now said, according to reports, that the games this weekend between the Blue Jays and the Phillies in Philadelphia have now been postponed. This coming just a little over an hour after we found out that two members of the Phillies organization, a member of the coaching staff and a home club attendant, have tested positive for COVID-19. The Phillies were slated to play a doubleheader against the Blue Jays on Saturday in Philadelphia, and then a single game on Sunday. This after the Phillies had been quarantined and being tested following a series with the Marlins this past weekend. Now the series between the Blue Jays and the Phillies, those games being in Philadelphia, has been postponed. That coming, according to reports, Caitlin McGrath of The Athletic and other beat writers from the Blue Jays reporting this. Blue Jays manager Charlie Montoyo saying that the Blue Jays' plan is for right now to stay in Washington, D.C., and hope they can work out at Nationals Park if the Nationals allow for it. The Nationals are also off this weekend after their series with the Marlins was postponed. This coming from Caitlin McGrath, staff writer from The Athletic. So we are seeing the fallout continue from this situation. New information coming in by the minute. Right now, teams not playing this weekend as a result of the COVID-19 outbreak from the Marlins and the situation as it is unraveling right now. The Marlins, Nationals, Phillies, and Blue Jays at this point appear not to be playing any Major League Baseball games this weekend at all as a result of the situation. This is just instant reaction right now. This situation is continuing to unravel, and baseball does not appear to have, Major League Baseball does not appear to have a handle on this situation whatsoever, in any way. This is quickly becoming even more of a disaster for the sport right now. It's getting very much out of hand, and it's unclear at this point how things are going to move forward. I'm sure we're going to be hearing some sort of statement from Major League Baseball, though it's unclear exactly how this is going to play out now. I'm sure this is going to continue to develop. I'm sure baseball, I imagine Major League Baseball is going to try to push forward and adjust the schedule, but this is getting more and more complicated, disastrous within the context of the game. And to be very clear, the biggest priority here is the health of everyone involved, the players, the coaches, the club attendants, everyone who has tested positive within these major league organizations and across the country. This is all relative to everything that's going on. But as of right now, the situation for Major League Baseball is falling apart here by the minute. Again, as of right now, it appears there are going to be basically three teams in the NL East and one team in the AL East. Right now, it appears will not be playing any Major League Baseball whatsoever this weekend. As I mentioned near the top of the show, the fallout of this situation is not necessarily over. We don't know the full scope of this situation. We don't know for a fact that the two members of the Phillies who tested positive, the Phillies organization, not players, important to note, who tested positive, if that's directly related to the Marlins situation. We don't know that for sure. But there's still, Phillies players are still being tested, results are still coming in, so we don't know how that's going to develop. And this is quickly spiraling continuing to spiral out of control for Major League Baseball at this point. So we are going to go ahead and move on here to some other news and notes for now. The baseball season is continuing at this point. We're going to go ahead and shift gears into talking about some other aspects. But again, the breaking news that we are following right now, the Blue Jays, their manager Charlie Montoyo said the team's games where they were supposed to play as the home team in Philadelphia this weekend, because of course because of the situation that the Blue Jays are in, they were supposed to act as the home team in Philadelphia against the Phillies, but they're not going to as a result of the situation that's developing. 2 members of the Phillies organization have tested positive for COVID-19. That information coming out just a while ago. So we'll continue to keep tabs on this and the situation. Here are the other news and notes that we have for you today. Just 4 games into the season, the Astros announced Tuesday that they have exercised their contract option on manager Dusty Baker for the 2021 season. The club will also bring back third base coach Gary Pettis and pitching coach Brent Strom for next year. The veteran manager Baker was hired in late January, weeks after AJ Hinch and general manager Jeff Luhnow were fired in wake of the Astros sign-stealing scandal, of course. General manager James Click saying in a statement that Dusty has been a perfect fit for our ball club. His knowledge of the game and experience have been invaluable to us in his first few months with the club. We're excited to see him in an Astros uniform again next year. Dusty Baker saying in part, I was one of the lamest ducks there is walking around. It feels pretty good to not be a lame duck, and this is the best I've been treated in quite a while. I commend owner Jim Crane and the organization and James Click for making this possible. I know we've got some work to do. The 71-year-old ranks 15th all-time in Major League Baseball history in managerial wins. This certainly seems logical. In some sense, it's like, oh, but that's odd. They're, just a few games into the season, you don't know much about the Astros based on those couple of games. Timing seems a little odd, but my take is, Dusty Baker's a known commodity. It's not as if, he had to really prove the type of manager he is and how and the way he communicates. The Astros have seen a good bit of him. Even though there have only been a couple of games, the organization has gotten a good sense of how he's going to manage that clubhouse, how he's going to manage in games over the past couple of months, how he works with players, how that all plays out. So it does make sense given the situation. A couple of other notes for you here today. Atlanta Braves outfielder Nick Markakis is rejoining the team and reversing course after he had previously decided to opt out of the 2020 season. Markakis saying, quote, in the pit of my stomach, I felt like I needed to be out there. Markakis, like all players who opt out of the 2020 season, was placed on the restricted list by his team, and he had to apply for reinstatement, which he has gotten. Reinstatement is handled case by case by Major League Baseball. From a on-the-field perspective, Markakis provides a nice boost to that Braves lineup. He's not, a huge threat in that lineup, but this is a team that is lacking in some outfield depth in many ways, so he'll get in there, really significant presence in that lineup. Still, even if not a, thunderous power hitter, still a notable addition on the field for the Braves this season. Veteran infielder Jose Reyes on Wednesday announced his retirement from Major League Baseball. The 37-year-old appeared in 16 MLB seasons. At his best, Reyes was one of the most dynamic and exciting players in Major League Baseball. He has retired at the age of 37. Former Boston manager John McNamara, who led the team to the 1986 American League pennant, died on Tuesday at the age of 88. His family confirmed the news to the Boston Globe. McNamara's managerial career spanned 3 decades and 6 different teams. During his Hall of Fame induction speech in 1993, Reggie Jackson said this of McNamara, who managed him in the minor leagues, quote, I learned to understand friendship and sensitivity from a very special friend by the name of John McNamara. He was my manager, and he would not allow the team to eat in a restaurant where I was not allowed to eat. I always wondered why we ate sandwiches on the bus and only made essential pit stops. I understood care from that. I'll always remember you, John, for your dignity and sensitivity and for stepping up at a time when very few did. A couple of injury updates for you here to round out our news and notes. San Francisco Giants manager Gabe Kapler said that veteran corner infielders Brandon Belt and Evan Longoria are expected to be activated from the IL on Thursday. That's today. Dodgers ace Clayton Kershaw is set to throw a bullpen today. Manager Dave Roberts had suggested that Kershaw could start tomorrow in Alex Wood's rotation spot. That now seems pretty unlikely, but Roberts says he does expect Kershaw to make his season debut sooner than later. National starter Steven Strasburg will miss his second scheduled turn in the team's rotation on Thursday today due to ongoing nerve irritation in his right hand. He is reportedly feeling better, though, and throwing every other day or so the team is hoping he'll be back with them and pitching, making his season debut sometime next week. The Angels placed shortstop Andrelton Simmons on the 10-day IL with a left ankle sprain as another injury update for you. So we're going to go ahead and shift on here from news and notes to one of our other big topics for the day here as I check to make sure we are continuing to follow this situation involving the fallout with of the Marlins COVID-19 outbreak situation. So it appears no more significant updates at this time, but we are going ahead and keep our eye on that, and we'll let you know of any new information. So let's go ahead and shift gears here to buy or sell, which is another one of our segments we have for you here on this show today. Not as much time as I would have liked for it because of the circumstances and what's happening, other things we need to talk about, but there are a number of teams and players of note who've gotten off to significant starts, whether they be really good starts or really bad starts. And so we're going to talk a little bit about whether or not I buy what we've seen from them this season as what we should expect moving forward, or whether I sell that. So let's just go ahead and jump right in. The first player I want to mention is Cincinnati starting pitcher Sonny Gray. He's been, by many measures, I would say the best starting pitcher in baseball to start the season. On opening day against the Tigers, Gray with 6 innings, 1 earned run, 2 walks, 9 strikeouts. Then last night against the Cubs, 6 2/3, 0 earned runs, 1 walk, and a career-high 11 strikeouts. Gray is now 2-0 to start the season with a .71 ERA and 20 strikeouts in 12 2/3 innings pitched. This is a guy who has a lot of potential, but hasn't panned out in recent years. He was really good with Oakland for a couple of years in the mid-2010s. 2 years ago with the Yankees, though, a .490 ERA. But I do buy what he's doing right now. So the answer to that is I buy Sonny Gray. I obviously don't think he's going to post a .71 ERA the rest of the way. But this is significant in the sense that it's not just a great start for Gray, it's a great continuation of an outstanding stretch last year. Last night was the 35th start in a row that Gray has allowed 6 or fewer hits. That is the longest such streak, excluding openers, in Major League Baseball history. The last time that Gray allowed more than 6 hits in a start was in August 1st of 2019 against the Orioles while pitching for the Yankees. Per Bobby Nightingale of the Cincinnati Enquirer, since July 2019, since last July, Gray has a .179 ERA with 134 strikeouts in 105 2/3 innings. Simply incredible. The 30-year-old seems to have figured something out. Sonny Gray, this great start is not just an isolated thing. It's a continuation of a great stretch from Sonny Gray. And that Cincinnati rotation could really be something if Gray continues to do what he has been doing, at least something similar to that. Luis Castillo. And then you've got Trevor Bauer, who got off to a good start for the Reds as well. We've seen really good and not so good from Trevor Bauer in recent years. But if those 3 players can keep things going well, I really think that the Reds, could be a force to be reckoned with. They might pick to win the NL Central. They're just 2-4 to start the season, but 2-4, I mean, that could easily, that's not especially concerning to me if their winning percentages is that low a few weeks from now. I'll be concerned, or even just a week from now, but I'm not too concerned yet about that. Another team, a team in this case that's off to a notable start, the Colorado Rockies. Their rotation last year, their starters ERA was 5.87. That's the worst. That was the worst in Major League Baseball. This year, through 5 games, the Rockies have the best rotation, the best pitching ERA from the rotation in Major League Baseball. Every pitcher who started a game for the team has fared well. German Marquez has 14 strikeouts in 11 and 2/3 innings to start the year with a 1.54 ERA. Every one of the Rockies pitchers pretty much is faring pretty well to start the year, but this is one where I'm going to sell what they've been doing so far, because Colorado has played 5 games this season, but they've been in Texas and in Oakland. The Oakland Coliseum is known as pretty pitcher friendly, and the speculation is that the Rangers' new ballpark will be as well. Early results seem to suggest that. So I'm selling what the Rockies' incredible pitching staffs, what they've done so far this season with that pitching staff, how incredibly they've performed. It's certainly possible that they've turned a corner, that the Rockies' starting pitching staff could be significantly improved this year, but it's too soon to tell, so right now that is a sell. Another notable performance comes from White Sox rookie outfielder Luis Robert. I talked about him. I teased this a little bit ago. He's off to a highly impressive start to the season. He's hit safely in 6 straight games to begin his MLB career. In 23 at-bats, a 3.48 average, 1 home run, 1 double, 1 stolen base. Incredible raw talent. And generally speaking, while I certainly don't buy him hitting 348, I buy the fact that I buy Robert in terms of being a really good player and being able to be a really good player moving forward. There's still questions about his plate discipline. He has 9 strikeouts to 1 walk in 6 games, but heading into last night, he was 94th percentile in sprint speed, 95th percentile in average exit velocity. That's according to CBS Sports' Chris Towers. In other words, this is a really dynamic talent with 5 tools. This is a guy with great speed, with great power. He's my AL Rookie of the Year pick. It's looking pretty good so far. The White Sox are 2-4 to start the season. I'm still pretty optimistic that this is a team that certainly could compete for a playoff spot in the shortened season with the expanded playoffs. The White Sox could certainly be a team to watch out for, and I'm excited about what Luis Robert can bring to the table. I want to switch gears now back to a team that's off to a notable start. The San Diego Padres are 4-2 to begin the year. They lost on a walk-off to the Giants last night, but I'm generally buying their good start to the season. This is a fun team, team that seems really energized. They have 3 players with multiple home runs: Will Myers, Manny Machado, Trent Grisham. Their starting pitchers haven't really been able to go too deep into games yet, but they've fared pretty well. Their ace, Chris Paddock, 11 innings, 1.64 ERA, 10 strikeouts, to just 1 walk. I'm buying the Padres as a team I'm pretty interested in this season. Things could obviously fall apart, but that's a team that has the young core. That's a team that has some veteran, proven pieces, and Eric Hosmer, Manny Machado, Tommy Pham, and others. So I'm interested to see what the Padres can do moving forward. Just a couple other ones I want to hit on real quick as we are running already up against the top of the hour. Oakland designated hitter Chris Davis is off to a really bad start to the season. He's still looking for his first hit. He's 0 for 15 and 7 strikeouts to begin the season. I'm selling that. It's a sell for me, basically. And what I mean by a sell is that I'm selling that he's going to be very bad. I still think he can turn it around. Davis has been so consistent. He struggled last year, but it seemed to be injury related. He was talking about a hand problem that he had impacting his ability to grip the bat. He was my pick for AL Comeback Player of the Year, and I'm certainly not willing to give up on that just yet for Chris Davis of the A's. But the team needs to kind of ride the hot hand. They may not be able to be patient with him, so he's going to need to get things going sooner rather than later. A couple other notable starts. I'm going to go through these really quickly. Christian Yelich of the Brewers, 1 for 27 with 1 homer through 6 games. He looks really lost at the plate right now, but I'm selling. I don't have any concern about. I'm selling that's that there's problem with Christian Yelich. It's certainly really concerning in some sense, but overall, I'm not particularly concerned about Christian Yelich. You have to have faith with these great proven hitters that they will get things figured out. We're still talking about a really small sample size. One other player I want to hit on really quickly is Seattle outfielder Kyle Lewis. We talked about him on Tuesday. He's off to a really impressive start to the season. He has 4 multi-hit games in 6 games, hitting .458. I buy Kyle Lewis. I don't buy him hitting .458, of course, but I think there's certainly something there. This is a former highly regarded outfield prospect, but it struggled, and he's not super young. but he showed real power down the stretch last year in September, and he's impressed so far this season, I think. The Mariners, again, not a team I'm expecting to compete, but an interesting player to watch there in Kyle Lewis. So we're going to go ahead and take one more final break here on Around the Bases. When we come back, so a couple of quick odds and ends, a quick look at what's on deck, some series for this weekend, and some final thoughts. Stay with us. You're watching ATB Live from 110 Sports. All right, welcome back to ATB Live from 110 Sports. I'm Chris Brown. We are streaming on the 110 Sports Network at 110sportsmedia.com/live. Had planned here for this last segment to give you some odds and ends, some quick stats, and a look at what's ahead this weekend, but given the circumstances, we're going to shift just a little here with some parting thoughts today. Do want to tell you this weekend a couple of things to keep an eye on, a couple of interesting series. Schedule for the weekend, the Red Sox and the Yankees slated to play in New York this weekend, the Mets and the Braves. The Padres are going to play at the Rockies, and the Indians are going to play in Minnesota. That is the plan for right now. But again, I just want to stress the situation that's going on right now. We've just learned today that another member of the Miami Marlins has tested positive for COVID-19. That brings the total of positive tests within the organization up to 19. That's 17 players and 2 coaches. Meanwhile, we learned just a little bit ago that the Phillies have 2 positive tests within their organization. None of them are players, but we're talking about a coach and a home clubhouse attendant have tested positive. As a result, the Phillies have canceled all activities at Citizens Bank Ballpark, and they were scheduled to play the Blue Jays this weekend on Saturday, starting with a doubleheader. The manager, Charlie Montoyo, saying that the games have been postponed. So at this point, it's been noted that if things are able to get off the ground again here for these teams that are impacted, the Phillies are going to have 7 games to make up if they want to get to 60. So a number of factors at play here. We have a situation in which we have 4 or 5, I believe it is, yes, 4 Major League Baseball teams who are not scheduled at this point to play games this weekend. The Marlins, the Nationals, the Phillies, and the Blue Jays. And the situation continues to fall apart at this point. Rob Manfred, MLB commissioner, speaking earlier this month on what might cause him to halt the season. This is what he said in part. Manfred said, quote, "If we have a team or two that's really decimated with a number of people who had the virus and can't play for any significant period of time, it could have a real impact on the competition." Now, you could argue you could certainly say that's not where we're at precisely right now, but we still don't know the full scope of the situation with the Marlins. Again, we have 2 members of the Phillies organization, no players testing positive, but again, the incubation period for this for COVID-19 can be several days. So we don't yet necessarily know the full scope of the situation. Games are being canceled. We have 4 teams who are not going to be able to play this weekend. We don't know how much greater the scope of this could be. And it's unclear at this point how things are going to be able to move forward for Major League Baseball. If things do continue to move forward, it's going to be, even in the best circumstances, a mess in terms of scheduling and how Major League Baseball wants to do this, and subbing things in for this, and teams playing these teams, and double headers here, and that's in a best case scenario. Right now, it's becoming more and more difficult to see how Major League Baseball season is going to be completed in 2020. That's not to say it won't be, but the situation continues to get worse and worse right now, by the hour and by the minute. We'll continue to keep tabs on this. Of course, I'm sure there's going to be plenty to talk about when we're back on Tuesday. I can only imagine what that could be. Obviously, we hope for the best in all these situations, but we will see how this develops in the coming hours and days. Again, to tell you one more time, the situation as it is right now, 4 Major League Baseball teams appear set to not play this weekend due to stemming from the Marlins COVID-19 outbreak. 17 players and 2 staff members, coaches for the Marlins, have tested positive for COVID-19. 2 members of the Phillies organization have tested positive, a coach and a home clubhouse attendant. We will see how this continues to change in the upcoming days, and of course bring you the latest on Tuesday. Thanks for watching this edition of Around the Bases live on the 110 Sports Network. I'm Chris Brown. A reminder to go to 110sportsmedia.com to check out all the latest written content we have up on the site for you right now. I've actually just finished a series looking back at the best of the last decade in Major League Baseball. Went through the top players at every position, and then wrapped it up with managers this week, so you can get that at 110sportsmedia.com. Also, continuing our looks back at the best at drafts in the NFL and NBA of the last 10 years, and much more. Just go to 110sportsmedia.com. Right side of the homepage, you can subscribe to our newsletter to bring you the latest shows, written content, and podcasts. The J Mole Show with Josh Molnix will be back here tomorrow at 11 Eastern, and then again on Monday, and then Touchline Talk with Josh Doring, and Around the Bases back with you on Tuesday. Thanks for watching again. Have a good weekend, stay safe, and I will talk to you on Tuesday.